I agreed to a marriage before I learned how to refuse. It ended a war the kingdom still praises me for, and it took something from me that never healed. I have lived many years inside that silence, and it has never forgiven me. Life in the palace moved with practiced calm. Footsteps softened on marble. Curtains opened and closed without sound. Every smile was measured, every word weighed before it was allowed to exist. I woke each morning knowing my days did not belong to me. Meals were shared with restraint, affection disguised as protocol. The council watched from behind polished tables, patient and precise, as if my future were already written and merely waiting for my consent. I believed this was normal. That love, if it ever came, would learn to remain hidden. I was born into a silence so deep it learned my name before I did. In the palace of my childhood, words were used sparingly, like rare spices kept behind locked doors. We spoke through glances, through the weight of pauses, through the careful way a servant's hands trembled when pouring wine too close to the edge of a goblet. My father called it discipline. My mother called it survival. I learned early that silence was not the absence of sound, but the presence of fear. I am the eldest child of a crown that had already tasted blood by the time it reached me. Each morning, I walked the eastern gallery as the bells rang, their echo rolling across marble floors like a warning. Portraits of my ancestors watched me pass. Men in armor, women with eyes sharpened by loss. None of them smiled. They did not need to. Their victories were written in borders, their failures buried in unmarked graves. I grew beneath their gaze, measuring my steps, my breath, my very thoughts. Palace life was a performance rehearsed endlessly. Meals were rituals. Conversations were traps. Even laughter was inspected before it was allowed to live. The council sat like a second throne behind the first, their influence seeping into every corner of the realm. They were not family, but they knew our weaknesses better than any blood relation ever could. I was trained to rule before I was allowed to love. My younger brother Alaric used to say the palace felt like a cathedral built for ghosts. He would whisper it when no one else could hear, when the corridors were empty and the guards changed shifts. He laughed too loudly for someone born into our name. My sister, Eloan, did not laugh at all. She learned to disappear in plain sight, to observe without being observed. We were three children shaped by the same walls, yet carved into different weapons. My mother died quietly. That is how these things happen in palaces. There was no scream, no dramatic collapse, only a door closed, a physician summoned, and a curtain drawn. By the time I was allowed into her chambers, the room had already been emptied of warmth. Her hand was cold in mine, lighter than I remembered. I wanted to speak, to ask her how to survive what was coming, but the words remained locked behind my teeth. From that day forward, silence became my inheritance. The war had not yet reached our gates, but it lived in every council session, every sealed letter, every map spread across polished tables. The northern lords had grown restless. Old treaties were being questioned. Borders shifted like uneasy dreams. The council spoke of strategy and alliances, of necessary sacrifices. They never spoke of souls. I was 17 when I first understood that my life would not belong to me. It happened during a winter banquet. One of those endless evenings where nobility gathered to admire themselves under candlelight. Music floated through the hall, soft and obedient. I stood beside my father, wearing a crown too heavy for my neck, smiling at people whose names I barely remembered. And then I saw her. She was not meant to be there, not truly. She belonged to a lesser house, one loyal enough to be invited, but insignificant enough to be overlooked. She stood near a pillar, half in shadow, listening more than speaking. Her hair was dark, unadorned, her dress simple, almost defiant in its modesty. When she looked at me, she did not bow immediately. That pause shattered something in me. Her name was Ceres. We did not speak that night. We did not need to. Something passed between us, silent and dangerous. I felt it settle in my chest, warm and terrifying. Later, I would understand that love, when forbidden, does not announce itself loudly. It waits, it watches, it binds itself quietly to your ribs and dares you to breathe. From that evening on, I noticed how empty the palace truly was. Days blurred into lessons and ceremonies. I learned the language of command, the weight of judgment. I learned how to hide my thoughts behind stillness, and in the spaces between duty, I searched for her without meaning to. A glimpse in the gardens, a shared glance during Mass. Never words, never touch. The council began to look at me differently. They spoke my name more often. They asked questions that were not questions at all. Who I might marry, which house would strengthen our claim, which union could quiet the northern unrest. My father listened. He always listened. Silence again as weapon and shield. At night, I dreamed of fire along the borders and woke with her name unspoken on my lips. My siblings sensed the shift before I did. Alaric grew bitter, reckless. He despised the council openly, which frightened me more than their quiet manipulations. Eloan watched me with eyes too knowing for her age. One evening, as we walked the southern terrace, she spoke without looking at me. "You love someone," she said. I stopped. She did not. "Be careful," she added softly. "They will smell it on you." I wanted to deny it. I wanted to tell her she was wrong. Instead, I said nothing. Silence again, choosing me. The villain of my story did not arrive with a blade. He arrived with a smile. Lord Maven, High Chancellor of the Council, had served 3 reigns. He knew where bodies were buried because he had chosen the ground. His voice was calm, reasonable. He spoke of peace, as if it were a favor we owed him. "The war can be avoided," he said one evening, as we stood before a map stained with old victories. "With the right marriage." I felt the air leave the room. He did not say her name. He did not need to. The marriage he proposed was political perfection, a union with the northern house most likely to rise in rebellion, a bride bred for obedience, a treaty sealed with vows instead of blood. My father said nothing. I said nothing. Inside me, something began to crack. I sought Ceres in the only place no one thought to watch, the old library, abandoned after a fire years before, dust and shadows, broken shelves. When I found her there, reading by a narrow window, the silence between us finally broke, not with words, with understanding. We stood too close. We did not touch. If we had, I think the world would have ended sooner. "This cannot be," she whispered. "I know," I answered. That was our romance, built of restraint, fed by absence, stronger for it. As the threat of war grew louder beyond the palace walls, my inner world collapsed inward. The council pressed harder. The court watched me like a held breath. I learned that love could be both refuge and wound. I began to understand the true cost of peace, and I had not yet paid it. The days after that understanding were heavier than any crown I had ever worn. I carried my duty like a second skin, tight and unforgiving. Every gesture became deliberate. Every word weighed. I felt as though the palace itself had leaned closer, listening for the faintest crack in my composure. Love had entered me quietly, but it had made noise inside my thoughts. And noise in a place like this was dangerous. I was summoned to the council chamber more frequently. The long table gleamed beneath high windows, its surface polished smooth by generations of hands that had signed orders of execution and treaties with equal calm. Lord Maven always sat closest to the throne. His presence was measured, almost gentle. He never raised his voice. He never needed to. Others leaned toward him instinctively, as if gravity itself bent in his favor. They spoke of legacy. They spoke of the realm as if it were a patient growing weaker, and I alone possessed the cure. They praised my restraint, my composure, my suitability to rule. Then they began to speak of heirs, of continuity, of how fragile peace truly was without the right bloodlines bound together. "You were born for this," Maven said one afternoon, his eyes steady on mine. "Few are." I wondered if he knew how much I despised him in that moment. At night, I paced my chambers, unable to sleep. I imagined Sarah standing alone beneath the weight of my indecision. I imagined my mother, had she lived, what counsel she might have given. My father remained distant, his illness worsening quietly. The crown was already sliding toward me, and I had not yet decided whether I would let it crush me or not. Duty was simple when it was abstract. Love made it unbearable. Ceres and I spoke rarely, and when we did, it was never openly. A sentence exchanged beneath the cover of propriety. A letter hidden inside a book neither of us officially read. Each word became sacred. Each meeting risked everything. And yet, the more the council pressed, the more essential she became to my breathing. She never asked me to choose her. That was the cruelty of it. She spoke instead of fear, of what war would do to the people she knew, of brothers already sharpening blades, of mothers already storing grain. Her love did not blind her to the world, it made her see it more clearly. That clarity wounded me deeper than any accusation ever could. "You are not only one man," she said once, her voice steady though her hands trembled. "You are a symbol. They will demand sacrifices from you they would never make themselves." I wanted to tell her I would burn the council to the ground if it meant keeping her safe. I told her nothing. Inside me, two lives began to pull in opposite directions. One belonged to the crown. It was composed of schedules, councils, appearances, and alliances. It demanded that I look beyond myself, beyond desire, beyond fear. It whispered that personal happiness was a luxury rulers could not afford. The other life was smaller, quieter, infinitely more dangerous. It imagined mornings without armor, conversations without strategy, a love that existed without permission. I began to resent the very virtues I'd been taught: honor, sacrifice, legacy, words used to justify devastation. My siblings felt the strain as well. Alaric confronted me one evening, his eyes burning with anger and desperation. "They are using you," he said, "and you are letting them." "They are using the realm," I replied. "I am merely the instrument." "That is what they want you to believe." His defiance frightened me. He spoke too freely, challenged too openly. I feared the council would mark him as a liability. Elawan, ever observant, intervened before our argument could be overheard. Later, she warned me that Maven had begun asking questions about my movements. He was circling. The council proposed the formal engagement shortly after. It was presented as a mercy. The Northern House had agreed, reluctantly, to peace. All that was required was my hand, my name, my future. The bride was described in flawless terms: obedient, pious, loyal. Her value was measured not in personality, but in strategic advantage. The room waited for my response. I felt Ceres in every breath I took. "I will consider it," I said. That was enough for them. Guilt settled into me like a second heart. I felt it with every step, every glance, every moment of hesitation. I had not yet betrayed her, but I was already betraying myself. The war loomed closer, its presence undeniable. Skirmishes along the border, villages emptied. The realm trembled, and they expected me to be its anchor. I sought solitude in the chapel, a place I had never truly believed in. Stone walls and dim light, prayers whispered by those who needed someone else to blame. I knelt not out of faith, but exhaustion. I asked for nothing. I only listened to the sound of my own breathing and wondered how many lives my decision would shape. Love, I learned, does not vanish when ignored. It sharpens. Ceres avoided me after the announcement rumors spread, not out of anger, but protection. Each distance she placed between us cut deeper than confrontation ever could. I wanted to beg her to stay close. I wanted to ask her to wait, but waiting in a kingdom on the brink of war was a luxury no one possessed. Lord Maven watched all of this unfold with patient satisfaction. He approached me privately at last, his voice low, confidential. "You hesitate because you are human," he said. "That is admirable. But humanity has no place in survival." I realized then that he did not care about peace. He cared about control. War was merely a tool to frighten us into obedience. Marriage was another. I was not ending a war. I was legitimizing his power. That knowledge twisted inside me, but even that revelation did not offer escape. To defy him would mean chaos. To obey him would mean surrendering something I could never reclaim. The night before, I was to formally accept the engagement. Ceres appeared at my door, unannounced, unprotected, brave beyond reason. She did not plead, she did not weep. She looked at me as if memorizing my face. "I will leave," she said, "before they force you to choose." The words shattered what little restraint I had left. I told her everything then. My fear, my anger, my hatred of the council, my love for her, spoken aloud for the first time, fragile and terrifying in its honesty. She listened, tears tracing silent paths down her cheeks. "You cannot save everyone," she said, "but you can decide who you become." That night did not end with promises, it ended with understanding. I watched her walk away, knowing the next choice I made would define not only my reign, but my soul. And the council waited. The council chamber became a theater of pressure. Maps multiplied. Messengers arrived daily, their boots stained with border dust and bad news. Each report was delivered with just enough alarm to justify urgency, never enough to provoke outright panic. That was Maven's genius. He understood that fear, when carefully rationed, made people obedient. I sat at the head of the table more often now. My father's health had declined to the point where even his presence felt ceremonial. His eyes followed the discussion, but he rarely spoke. When he did, it was to confirm what had already been decided. I realized with a slow dread that the crown had begun to pass to me not through proclamation, but through absence. The council spoke through me, not to me. They framed every argument as concern for the realm, every demand as inevitability. They praised my restraint when I remained silent, mistaking endurance for agreement. I learned to watch their faces instead of listening to their words. Who leaned forward, who avoided my gaze, who glanced at Maven before speaking. Hidden agendas revealed themselves in the smallest gestures. The northern threat was exaggerated when useful, minimized when inconvenient. Supplies were delayed deliberately to create dependence. Noble houses were rewarded or punished under the guise of logistics. I saw it clearly now. The council did not fear war. They feared losing relevance, and I was their greatest asset. Lord Maven began to visit my chambers unannounced, always polite, always brief. He spoke to me not as a ruler, but as a mentor. That was more dangerous. "You carry this burden well," he said one evening, standing near the window, watching the city lights flicker below. "The people will love you for it." "They do not note the burdens they are spared," I replied. "They note peace," he said, "and peace requires obedience." I understood then that his vision of peace left no room for dissent or love. My engagement was announced publicly soon after. Trumpets echoed through the square. The crowd cheered with the enthusiasm of people desperate for stability. I stood beside a woman chosen for me, her expression composed, her eyes empty of expectation. She was not cruel. She was not kind. She was exactly what the council wanted, a vessel. Ceres was not present. I had ensured it. That absence haunted me more than her presence ever could. The political pressure intensified immediately. The northern lords responded favorably. Armies paused their advance. Trade routes reopened cautiously. The council congratulated themselves. Maven smiled more openly now, his confidence nearly radiant. "You see," he told me, "one choice can save thousands." I wondered how many it would destroy. My siblings grew distant. Alaric was furious, reckless in his defiance. He spoke openly of resisting the council, of rallying loyal houses. I begged him to be careful. He accused me of cowardice. Elawan said nothing, but her disappointment was sharp enough to wound. Family dinners became unbearable. Every meal felt like a performance staged for spies. Every glance was scrutinized. I feared that even grief had become dangerous. The palace had no room for private emotion anymore. We were all actors in a script written by men who would never bleed for its ending. And yet, despite everything, love refused to die quietly. I received word of Ceres through intermediaries. She had not left the city. She had taken refuge with distant relatives. She avoided court functions. She lived smaller, more carefully. The knowledge of her continued existence was both comfort and torture. I could not see her. Maven ensured that. He assigned guards subtly, adjusted schedules, restricted access under the pretense of security. He never forbade anything outright. He simply made certain things impossible. The villain never declares himself. He convinces you that resistance is futile. The council convened an emergency session when news arrived of a skirmish along the border. Blood had been spilled, not enough to call it war, enough to justify escalation. Maven argued that immediate marriage would solidify the treaty and prevent further violence. The ceremony was moved forward. I felt something inside me go cold. That night, my father summoned me privately. It was the first time in weeks. He looked frail, diminished. The man who had once commanded armies now struggled to sit upright. "You are doing what must be done," he said. His voice lacked conviction. "I never wanted this for you," he added, "but the crown does not ask what we want." I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask him why he had taught me to value honor if it would be stripped from me piece by piece. I said nothing. Silence had become my only inheritance from him. As preparations accelerated, so did my sense of suffocation. I walked the palace at night, tracing paths I had known since childhood, realizing they were no longer mine. Every stone felt complicit, every corridor narrowed. Then Elowen came to me. She closed the door behind her, a rare act of defiance. Her voice was low, urgent. "They are planning more than a marriage," she said. "Maven has been meeting with the northern envoys alone." I felt my pulse quicken. "He wants war," she continued. "Not now, later, controlled, profitable. This peace is temporary." The truth settled heavily between us. My sacrifice was not meant to end the war. It was meant to delay it until the council could profit from its return. I was not a solution. I was leverage. Rage burned through me, sharp and unfamiliar. For the first time, I considered defiance not as fantasy, but as necessity. I knew where Ceres was. I knew the risk. The night before the ceremony, I went to her. No guards, no announcement. I moved through servant passages and forgotten stairwells, guided by memory and desperation. When she opened the door and saw me, shock gave way to something deeper. We did not speak at first. Words felt too small. I told her the truth, all of it. The manipulation, the coming war, my role in their design. She listened, her expression steady, her resolve terrifying in its calm. "You cannot marry her," she said. "I may have to," I replied. "No," she said. "You may choose not to." The simplicity of her defiance frightened me. I realized then that the council had underestimated one thing. They believed silence meant obedience. They had forgotten what silence can hide. By dawn, my path was clear, and it led directly into fire. War does not announce itself with trumpets. It arrives first as a change in tone. The palace woke differently after that night. Servants moved faster, guards spoke less. The air itself felt tightened, as if the walls were holding their breath. News traveled in fragments, never whole. A village burned, a road closed, a banner seen where it should not have been. The council called it precaution. I called it inevitability. By sunrise, Maven knew I had left my chambers during the night. He did not confront me, he adjusted. That was his strength. He shifted the schedule, doubled the guard, sealed exits under the guise of protecting me from northern assassins. He spoke publicly of threats against my life. Privately, he watched me like a man measuring the distance to a cliff. The wedding preparations continued, white cloth draped across stone that had once been stained red, flowers imported from lands already starving. The symbolism was grotesque. Peace performed for an audience while blades were sharpened behind curtains. I stood before the mirror as servants dressed me, and for the first time, I did not recognize the man reflected there. He looked composed, controlled, a future ruler prepared to sacrifice everything personal in the name of stability. They admired that man. I despised him. Reports from the border grew worse. The northern houses tested our resolve with small, precise violence, enough to provoke fear, not enough to justify open war. Maven used each incident as proof that haste was necessary. If you hesitate now, he told the council, you invite catastrophe. I watched the others nod. I said nothing. Inside me, decisions were being made in a language no one else could hear. I met with the generals in private, men who had seen war without poetry, men who understood cost. I asked questions Maven never did, about supply lines, about morale, about what would happen if the treaty failed. Their answers were cautious, honest. War would come either way. The marriage would delay it, perhaps, or it would merely change its shape. A civil fracture instead of a border clash. A quieter devastation, one harder to rally against. That was when I understood the cruel brilliance of the council's design. If I married and war came later, history would blame me less. If I refused and war came now, history would condemn me entirely. They had framed the narrative before the choice was even made. I was not choosing between peace and war. I was choosing who would be allowed to speak when it ended. Ceres was hidden now for her own safety, Ilawan insisted. Loyal servants, unmarked by council influence, had moved her beyond the city walls. I did not know where. That ignorance was a wound I accepted willingly. Loving her had already placed her in danger. Knowing less was the only protection I could offer. My fiancée sensed the tension. She approached me one evening, her voice quiet, almost apologetic. "You do not have to pretend with me," she said. "I know this is not your choice." I studied her then, truly. She was not my enemy. She was another offering laid at the altar of strategy. That knowledge complicated my anger. It sharpened it. "I am sorry," I said. She smiled faintly. "So am I." Outside the palace, the city changed. Markets closed early. Families sent children away. Faith returned to people who had abandoned it years before. War lived in rumor and preparation, in whispered prayers and hurried embraces. I walked among them in disguise once, just to hear their voices unfiltered. They wanted peace. They would accept any lie that promised it. The council convened one final time before the ceremony. Maven spoke at length. He praised unity. He praised sacrifice. He praised me. I interrupted him. The room stilled. It was a small act, but it felt like breaking stone. "You have planned for war," I said. "Not its prevention, its management." A ripple of discomfort passed through the table. Maven's expression did not change. "War is not planned," he replied. "It is anticipated." "You have delayed reinforcements to the eastern border," I continued. "You have allowed skirmishes to fester. You have negotiated terms that benefit this council more than the crown." His eyes sharpened. "You accuse us of treason?" he asked calmly. "I accuse you of ambition," I said, "and of mistaking control for loyalty." Silence followed, heavy, dangerous. "You forget your place," Maven said. "No," I replied. "I am finally learning it." The council dismissed the meeting under the pretense of further deliberation. I was escorted back to my chambers by guards who did not meet my eyes. The message was clear. I had crossed an invisible line. That night, the Northern Army moved. Not an invasion, a demonstration, thousands of torches visible from the eastern towers, a warning written in firelight. Panic rippled through the city. Bells rang, orders were shouted. The illusion of peace collapsed in an instant. Maven acted swiftly. He declared emergency authority, mobilized troops loyal to the council, issued proclamations in my name without my consent. The war he claimed to fear now justified everything he desired. I watched the city prepare for bloodshed and felt something settle inside me. Clarity. I summoned Alaric. He arrived armored, furious, ready. For once, his recklessness was an asset. "They are moving without you," he said. "If you do nothing, they will turn you into a symbol and rule through you." "I know," I replied. "That ends now." We spoke quickly, strategically, family bound not by affection, but necessity. Elawan joined us, her mind sharp, her loyalty absolute. Plans were formed not for victory, but for exposure. If war was coming, it would come with truth. I sent messages to the generals, not commands, requests. I appealed not to duty, but conscience. Some refused, some hesitated, some listened. Dawn broke over a city armed for survival. The wedding bells were silent. The ceremony was postponed indefinitely, officially due to security concerns. Unofficially, because the realm was slipping out of the council's grasp. Maven confronted me at last, his patience finally eroded. "You will marry," he said, "or you will be remembered as the ruler who chose chaos." I met his gaze without fear. "I will be remembered," I said, "for choosing responsibility over submission." His smile vanished. In that moment, I understood that war was no longer the greatest threat. I was, and once a crown becomes dangerous to those who seek to control it, blood always follows. The shadow of war fell fully across the realm, and I stepped into it willingly. The breaking does not come all at once. It arrives in fragments. A messenger collapses in the courtyard, breathless, blood on his sleeve. A general refuses a summons. A loyal servant fails to return. Each moment alone is survivable. Together, they become unbearable. By the third day after the postponed ceremony, the palace no longer felt like a seat of power. It felt like a besieged body, shutting down non-essential parts to preserve the heart. Corridors were closed, windows shuttered, trust narrowed to a handful of names. Sleep abandoned me. When I closed my eyes, I saw futures collapsing into one another. A war fought in my name, a marriage that ended nothing. Ceres disappearing into history like a footnote no one dared preserve. I carried all of it inside my chest until breathing itself became effort. The council ruled openly now. Maven no longer pretended to advise. He issued orders. He spoke to generals without including me. Proclamations bore my seal, forged with terrifying precision. The people still believed I stood behind them. That illusion was my last protection, and it was killing me. Alaric was arrested at dawn. They claimed he had attempted to incite rebellion among the eastern regiments. There was truth in it, distorted just enough to justify chains. When they brought him past my chambers, his face bruised, his defiance unbroken, something inside me finally gave way. I went to Maven, not as a ruler, as a man stripped to his limits. "He is my brother," I said. "Release him." Maven regarded me with clinical interest. "You taught him defiance," he replied. "This is the consequence. He is not your enemy." "No," Maven said calmly. "You are." That word echoed longer than any shout ever could. I realized then that I had miscalculated one thing. I believed the council needed me alive, unbroken, visible. I was wrong. They needed the crown. Whether it sat on my head or hovered above my grave was negotiable. Fear finally reached its deepest point, not fear of death, fear of becoming irrelevant while still breathing. Ilawan came to me that night with news that shattered what remained of my restraint. Ceres had been discovered, not captured, not harmed, but discovered. The council knew she existed. They knew what she was to me. Maven had not yet acted. That restraint was worse than cruelty. He wanted me to decide how much she was worth. I retreated inward after that. I stopped attending meetings. I answered no summons. I remained in my chambers while the world outside accelerated toward violence. They called it weakness. They whispered that the future ruler was unraveling. Let them. Inside, I was confronting the truth I had avoided since the beginning. I could not save the realm without destroying myself. Every path demanded a sacrifice. The question was no longer whether I would lose something precious, but what kind of loss I was willing to live with. If I surrendered fully to the council, married as commanded, allowed them to use my reign as a mask for their ambition, the war would pause. Briefly, long enough for them to prepare a better one. Ceres would vanish quietly, efficiently. Alaric would die in custody. Ilawan would learn to survive by silence alone. If I defied them openly, exposed Maven, fractured the council, war would come immediately. The realm would burn in the short term. Thousands would suffer. History would never forgive me. And yet, there was a third path. One so personal, so devastating, that I had refused to name it. Marriage had power, not as romance, as weapon. If I married not the woman they chose, but the war itself, if I bound myself publicly, irrevocably, to the peace they could not control, the idea formed slowly, painfully. I would marry the Northern Alliance itself, not their obedient daughter, not their symbol of submission. I would propose a union that stripped the council of leverage, a marriage negotiated directly between crowns, not councils, a binding accord witnessed by the people, sanctified beyond Maven's reach. And Ceres, she would not be my wife. She would be my loss. The realization broke me completely. I collapsed alone, finally allowing grief to exist without discipline. I mourned a life that would never be lived, mornings that would never come, a love that would remain perfect because it was unfinished. Power demanded not only sacrifice, it demanded solitude. By morning, my decision was complete. I emerged from my chambers altered, not resolved, emptied. There is a difference. I summoned Maven. He arrived confident, already rehearsing victory. "I will marry," I said before he could speak. Relief flickered across his face. "But not your candidate," I continued. "I will negotiate directly with the Northern Crown. A public union. No council intermediaries. No delayed war. Full demobilization witnessed by the realm." His composure shattered for the first time. "That is impossible," he said sharply. "You cannot—" "I can," I replied, "and I will. Or I will abdicate publicly and expose everything you have done in my name." The threat was absolute. Maven stared at me, calculating. He understood immediately what this meant. My marriage would end the war in truth, not appearance. It would also destroy his influence. A peace that did not require him had no use for him. "You would ruin yourself," he said. "Yes," I answered, "but I will save the realm." He left without another word. The cost of my decision hit me fully only after he was gone. I sent word to Ceres, not to meet, to leave, far, safely, forever. I did not trust myself to see her again. I did not trust the world to survive it. That night I stood alone on the highest balcony of the palace, listening to the distant movement of armies preparing for dawn. I felt nothing, not courage, not fear, only the hollow certainty of someone who has chosen an ending. The war would end because of my marriage, and my soul would end with it. The confrontation was inevitable. It did not come with raised voices or drawn blades. It came with witnesses. Maven underestimated one thing until the end. He believed power lived behind closed doors. He believed truth could be shaped quietly, documents altered, histories softened. He did not understand that once a ruler steps into the open, once he places his choices before the people, secrecy loses its armor. I ordered the great hall opened at dawn, not for ceremony, for reckoning. The banners of every house were raised. Nobles were summoned without explanation. Clergy arrived uneasy. Generals stood uncertain at the edges, hands never far from their swords. The people gathered beyond the gates, sensing significance even without invitation. Maven arrived last. He looked at the arrangement and understood too late. The throne stood empty. I did not sit above them. I stood among them. When I spoke, my voice carried farther than I expected. "I have ruled in your name," I began, "but I have not always spoken in your hearing. That ends today." A murmur rippled through the hall. I laid out everything: the delayed reinforcements, the manipulated skirmishes, the forged decrees. I named names. I cited dates. I held nothing back. Elawan had prepared the evidence meticulously. Letters intercepted, seals broken, orders traced not to the crown, but to the council. Maven stepped forward once, attempted to interrupt. I did not stop speaking. Each word stripped another layer of illusion away. The nobles listened, stunned. The generals stiffened. Some faces paled, others hardened. Truth does not liberate everyone. It divides. When I finished, I turned to Maven. "You accuse me of inviting chaos," I said. "This is the chaos you cultivated." He smiled then, sharp and desperate. "And what will you do?" he asked. "Arrest us all? Shatter governance on the eve of war?" "No," I replied. "I will remove you." Guards loyal to the crown stepped forward. Not all of them. Enough. Maven did not resist. He only looked at me with something like admiration, twisted with hate. "You think this ends with me?" he said quietly. "You think exposure is victory?" "No," I said. "I think it is the beginning." He was taken away without ceremony. The hall remained silent long after he was gone. I did not wait for approval. I announced the terms of my marriage immediately. Not a private contract, not a council-negotiated exchange, a public accord between crowns, witnessed by the realm and sanctified by oath. A union designed not to bind families but to dismantle armies. A marriage stripped of romance, elevated to sacrifice. The northern envoys were summoned that same day. They arrived cautious, calculating, expecting leverage. They found none. I spoke plainly. No threats, no flattery. I offered what they could not refuse and what they could not corrupt. Immediate demobilization on both sides, shared governance over contested borders, my life bound to the peace so completely that any betrayal would damn my name forever. They saw the truth of it. War thrives on ambiguity. I gave them none. The agreement was reached before sunset. The war ended not with cheers, but with stunned disbelief. Armies stood down. Torches were extinguished. Borders reopened slowly, like wounds learning to heal. The people celebrated not with joy, but relief. That I learned was enough. The marriage followed swiftly. No delay allowed grief to breathe. I stood before the altar days later beside a woman I respected and did not love. The vows were spoken clearly, publicly. Every word echoed with finality. The people watched a peace being born from the funeral of something they would never know. I did not look for Ceres. I did not need to. I felt her absence like a missing limb. When the crown was placed upon my head, it felt lighter than it ever had, because everything else had been stripped away. That night, alone in my chambers, I allowed myself one final truth. I had ended the war, and in doing so, I had crossed the point of no return. The realm would remember me as a savior. History would call me wise, but love would never forgive me, and neither would I. The aftermath was quieter than I expected. War leaves echoes even when it ends cleanly. They linger in the way people speak more softly, in the way doors are closed more carefully. Victory did not arrive as celebration. It arrived as exhaustion. The council was dismantled slowly, deliberately, not all at once. That would have been too obvious, too violent a correction. Some members were dismissed publicly for corruption. Others retired suddenly, citing health or age. A few disappeared into distant estates, stripped of influence but spared humiliation. I allowed that mercy not for them, but for the realm. Stability, I learned, often requires swallowing injustice. Lord Maven was tried, not before the masses, before history. His crimes were recorded, sealed, preserved for a future that would judge him without my voice interfering. He was imprisoned, not executed. Death would have made him a martyr. Life, stripped of relevance, was the harsher sentence. When I visited him once, unannounced, he looked smaller. "You won," he said. "No," I replied. "I survived." That distinction mattered. Alaric was released, but something essential had been broken in him. He no longer trusted structures. He no longer believed defiance alone could save anything. He left court soon after, choosing the borderlands over palace halls. I let him go. Some wounds heal only in distance. Elawan remained. She became my shadow, my conscience. Where the council once whispered manipulation, she spoke clarity. She understood the cost of what I had done without needing it explained. In her presence, I allowed myself fewer masks. My marriage settled into formality. Respect replaced expectation. We learned each other as partners, not lovers. The court admired our composure. They praised our unity. They never questioned the absence of warmth. Monarchs, after all, are not expected to burn. At night, I lay awake beside a woman who had given up her own future as surely as I had given up mine. We spoke sometimes of governance, sometimes of nothing at all, never of love. That silence was mutual. It was not cruel. It was simply honest. The people prospered slowly. Trade returned. Fields were replanted. Children were born into a peace they did not understand the price of. That, too, was as it should be. Sacrifice loses its meaning when it demands recognition. And Ceres. Her name did not surface in public. It lived elsewhere. Occasionally, a rumor reached me. A woman teaching children in a distant province. A healer traveling between villages. A life lived quietly, purposefully, beyond the reach of crowns. I never confirmed any of it. Knowing would have been indulgence. Wondering was punishment enough. There were moments I nearly broke. At ceremonies where music swelled and couples danced too freely. At festivals where laughter felt unguarded. At dawn, when the light fell across the city just as it had the morning I first chose duty over desire. In those moments, grief rose without warning, sharp and unmanageable. I learned to master it. That is the final cost of power, not the loss of innocence, the loss of permission. History began to shape me into something acceptable. They wrote of decisive leadership, of strategic brilliance, of a ruler who chose peace over passion. They carved my likeness into stone with eyes that revealed nothing. They taught my story to children without ever mentioning what was buried beneath it. I allowed it because the truth, unsoftened, would have demanded something from them I had no right to ask. The realm stabilized. My reign endured. On the surface, everything succeeded. Inside, something remained unresolved. Loss does not fade when it is chosen. It settles. It becomes architecture. I carried it with me into every judgment, every law, every mercy granted or denied. It made me careful. It made me restrained. It made me alone in a way no crowd could ever touch. The war was over. The cost continued, and it always would. Legacy is a word spoken by those who will not live inside it. I am older now, not ancient, not frail, but shaped by time in ways no mirror can fully show. The palace remains, though it feels less oppressive than it once did. Or perhaps I have simply grown used to the weight of it. Stone learns its bearer as much as the bearer learns the stone. Peace endured. That is the truth history will remember. Borders held. Treaties lasted longer than expected. The war that was meant to define my reign became a footnote instead. Scholars debated my choices with clean hands and distant eyes. They praised restraint. They admired foresight. They never asked what it required to wake each morning knowing the most important decision of your life had already been made and could never be unmade. My children grew beneath banners that did not burn. They asked me once if I had loved their mother. I told them yes, it was not a lie. Love has many forms, and not all of them are gentle. I loved her with respect, with loyalty, with the discipline of someone who understands consequence. That love sustained a kingdom. It did not sustain me. Both truths can exist. Eloan aged beside me, steady and unflinching. She never married. She never needed to. She devoted herself to ensuring that no council ever again learned to rule from the shadows. When people spoke of her, they did so with quiet awe. She became something rare in any monarchy, unbending. Alaric returned only once, years later. He stood at the edge of court, older, scarred, finally at peace with his distance. We spoke privately, not of politics, not of the past, only of what had been lost and what had been spared. When he left again, I did not follow him with regret. Some paths are meant to diverge. As for Ceres, the truth found me without my permission. Late in my reign, a petition crossed my desk from a distant province. A request for funding to expand a school and infirmary that had become vital to its region. The writing was careful, the argument sound, the signature unfamiliar. But I knew the hand. I approved it without comment. That night, I stood alone on the balcony and allowed myself to remember her face without armor. Not as she was when we parted, but as she had been when she first looked at me without bowing. I wondered if she ever spoke my name. I wondered if she had found peace. I did not wonder whether I had done the right thing. That question had died long ago. Right and wrong are luxuries of those untouched by consequence. I had chosen necessity. I had accepted what followed. When I die, they will bury me among rulers who expanded borders and crushed enemies. They will carve my deeds into stone and simplify my choices into lessons. They will say my marriage ended a war. They will not say what it destroyed. And that is as it should be, because legacy is not what is remembered. It is what remains standing when everything personal has fallen away. The realm stands, and in the silence it enjoys. My soul rests where no crown can reach it. If this story moved you, stay with us. Like this video, so the algorithm knows this silence mattered. Subscribe for more royal dramas where love is forbidden, power has a cost, and peace is never free. Comment below. Was the sacrifice worth it? Your voice keeps these stories alive.